Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Dr. V on Call. We've got a great show tonight, two terrific guests. And first I'm going to introduce my first guest, Attorney Michael Koskoff. Mike is a personal injury lawyer who specializes in malpractice. He's also a distinguished member of the Inner Circle of Advocates. This is a group of 100 of the top plaintiff lawyers in the United States, and you're the president-elect of that organization, Mike. Also a member of the International Society of Barristers, and he does a lot of lecturing, both in the United States and in Canada. And Mike, thanks for taking out the time to be on the show tonight. Our second guest is Dr. Bob Levine. Bob's a neurosurgeon and an author, a neurologist, and an author. Who's recently wrote a book, Shock Therapy for the American Healthcare System. And Bob is a neurologist in Norwalk and an associate clinical professor of medicine at Yale. I think I got all that. You guys, your biographies are so long, so I can't get it all in. But tonight is a special show. Many of you have heard about malpractice on TV, and it's an issue that affects all of us, not just doctors, but certainly patients and the lawyers as well. So what we're going to do tonight is not a debate. This is a friendly discussion, believe it or not. And I'm going to start off with Attorney Koskoff. Mike, in simple terms for the public, what is malpractice? How would you define that?
Well, malpractice under the law is an occurrence in which the doctor or healthcare professional involved violates what is called the standard of medical care. And the standard of care is something which, of course, it's often not in writing, often not a list of things that are called the standards, but what is generally acceptable for medical professionals of the type involved. You know, in a sense that it's a bad word, malpractice, because it makes you think that for some reason that the doctor is bad, and it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that on that particular occasion, the doctor or healthcare professional didn't adhere to what would be considered good standard of practice.
I like the way you qualify that, Mike. Thank you. Bob, you sort of go along with that? Is that?
Yeah, I think the definition is fine.
Okay, good. Good. The problem today is that a lot of, and you can both jump in this, whoever thinks you want to jump in first, that the fear, and I guess that's most of what we've been seeing in the papers, Mike, Bob, the fear of malpractice really causes them to practice what we call defensive medicine. That's the new mantra that we're all seeing in the paper and on TV. Mike, what do you say to that? Then we'll let you get you into that.
This has got to be probably the longest part of the discussion we're going to have, because it's a very complicated question. But first of all, let's talk about what defensive medicine is supposed to be. The doctor says the patient doesn't need the test, but I'm going to do this test because I'm afraid if I don't do it and something happens, I'll get sued. Right? That's the argument.
That's it. I agree with you.
But let's analyze whether that makes any sense or not. First of all, how could a doctor be sued for not performing a test that a patient doesn't need? It can't really happen. I mean, except in perhaps the most unusual case. And the reason it can't happen is because you can, first of all, only get sued if you have violated the standard of care, so that the test has to be mandated by the standard of care.
Right.
Secondly, you can only get sued if the patient is harmed. Well, if the test wasn't necessary, how could the patient get harmed by the failure to do it? So the whole argument that people like my friend Bob, and I say he's my friend because we've been friends for 40 years now, Bob, that my friend Bob might make is...
Until tonight, Bob was friends.
We were friends for years, up until now, I think. But, but it doesn't make any sense that a doctor would do that. And there's a third thing I want to bring out just initially, and that is a doctor is saying this: I am performing an unnecessary test. That's what he's saying with defensive medicine. I'm performing an unnecessary test. Do you think doctors perform unnecessary tests, then sign a form, an insurance form, saying this test was necessary, thereby committing insurance fraud on a regular basis? I don't think so. I grew up with doctors. None of the doctors I knew would do something like that. They're too ethical. Most doctors are simply too ethical. Even if they were wanted to do it, they wouldn't, because the ethics of the profession wouldn't allow it.
See,
Okay, Bob.
I think part of the problem is the fear of malpractice has changed the standard of care, and people are doing tests automatically because they are afraid they're going to be sued if they miss something. You know, good care means what is the probability of something occurring. If we're talking about 1 in 100,000 of something going wrong, and people are afraid of that, and they do the test because of that, they can justify the test. That doesn't mean that it's good in terms of the healthcare system or in terms of the patient, because occasionally there can be adverse effects that may not be realized. For instance, if a patient goes into an emergency room with a head injury, they automatically have a CAT scan. It's invariable because the emergency room physician is afraid that the patient may have had some bleeding, even though the head injury at times is very minor. Now, there's nothing that's going to go wrong because the patient has the CAT scan, except the patient has gotten a little bit of radiation. And these are cumulative over time. Right now in the United States, I think we do between 60 and 80 million CAT scans every year. I mean, this is enormous. It's a tremendous burden on the healthcare system in terms of increasing costs. It's not good for patients, and it just doesn't work. It's not a good way to practice medicine. But that is the standard of care right now because people are afraid of missing things. There shouldn't be that fear. Occasionally, you may miss something. There's nothing wrong with that. That's life. But, you know, we can't do that. We can't keep doing expensive tests and potentially dangerous tests, even if they're a minor danger, just because people are afraid of being sued.
Well, let's talk about the fear. And both of you fellows have mentioned fear. And I'm a physician, but I'm a third party. I'm just objective in this discussion. But fear, both of you have mentioned it, several times. Boy, that's a tough one. How severe is that fear, or what is it that we're afraid of?
First of all, I don't think it's necessarily a conscious fear. I don't think a doctor says, I'm afraid of being sued, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I think it's become an almost automatic behavior. There was a survey that was done by the Massachusetts Medical Society last year. Right. They put out a survey to a group of physicians. There were 900 physicians that responded in terms of how many of these engage in, quotes, defensive medicine, end quotes. And 83% of the physicians who responded said that they do tests that they feel may not be medically necessary, but they do it because they're afraid of
Now, Bob, you know better than that. You know better. I know that survey. That survey, you would never, as a doctor, rely on something like that to be scientific. The doctors who were being surveyed knew full well that the reason for the question was that if they answered, yes, I do unnecessary tests because of fear of malpractice, that's going to help them to change the malpractice laws so they won't be sued. Sure. There's a self-interest in them giving that answer. Now, every objective organization who has studied the issue of defensive medicine, and by the objective organizations, I'm talking about the Government Budget Office and the Government Accounting Office, who both have looked at the question of defensive medicine and said they